Today's conversation would be about the Finance Commission's report. And as I mentioned, Finance Commission effectively is focused on devolution or sharing of revenues of the center with the state and the basis for that. So how does revenues get shared? How does income earned by the center gets distributed? What is the basis? Is it population? Is this economic prosperity? Is it collection of taxes? So there could be a zillion ways. So the reason why we wanted to focus on Finance Commission was how to understand India as a nation, the way it functions. If you see the constitution, it says Bharat is a union of states, right? So we are a union of states, and we are given rights to the central government to collect certain taxes. A lion's share of taxes today are collected by central government, be it income tax or GST or customs. Now, how does that money get split to states, and what is the basis for that? Which is why we have this study on Finance Commission. So coming forward, I would thank Sundar Rajan Jugal and Sundar for helping with the presentation. A very detailed presentation, something to do a lot with the macroeconomic understanding or the public finance, what we call. A huge list of terms have been used. I would suggest we look at these terms and when we get through these presentations. This is the agenda, friends, as we look at today. What is Finance Commission? We'll try and have a high-level overview. What is the 15th Financial Commission's terms of reference? So this is something what we call as TOR, terms of reference. What is the mandate? Right? Within the mandate, how they operate. What is the fiscal roadmap? So where the country is likely to be headed, at least the goal for that. And see, these are more like your 5-year plans where you would have a high level macroeconomic mandate which will be valid for a period of 5 years. Assessment of state and union finances. Vertical and horizontal devolution. So vertical is between the center and state, horizontal is between states. Grants and aid, empowerment of local bodies, disaster risk management, and what's the way forward for our nation. That's the proposal. So let's now try and understand Finance Commission for our layman. Obviously, we all are, at least I'm a layman in this regard, just trying to understand this. If we look at Article 280 of the Constitution, Finance Commission was established in accordance with Article 280, where it was formed to define the financial relationship between center and individual states, with the main mandate being to redress the fiscal imbalance in the country. Now, what is this fiscal imbalance? The central government collects a lot of money, so it has a huge control over the resources, and that needs to be spread and distributed across the states. And second, between states, there is a lot of difference in economic prosperity. For the simple reason being, some states, let's say the port states, let's say of Mumbai or Chennai or Vizag, have a far better probability of being commercially more prosperous compared to the landlocked states. So there is a natural advantage and disadvantage. So that needs to be sorted because it's like imagine a family has 5 children. There could be certain pluses and minuses between kids, but that needs to be ironed out by way of mixed distribution. So that's the imbalance which they are trying to sort out fiscally. The first Finance Commission was set up in 1951, and so far we've had about 15 commission, and the maximum gap between each of these is about 5 years. And similar to the Central Finance Commission, which we have, the governor of every state has to constitute a state finance commission where between the state revenue, where the state would look at it like a country, and the sub provinces within the state, how the income gets distributed horizontally or vertically. That's what we would end up looking at. So that's the State Finance Commission. We are not looking at State Finance Commission for the day. For our mandate is, at least our terms of reference, is at the Central Finance Commission. So what is the composition of members and their qualification? So the Finance Commission is appointed by the President of India, Honorable President, so it reports directly to him, and shall have five members. There shall be a chairman who shall have experience in public affairs, and four other members who some of them are have who have the competence and experience to be appointed as judges of High Court, or those who have special knowledge of the finances and accounts of the government, wide experience in financial matters and administration, or someone who has special knowledge of economics. So this could be the set of people who could possibly be part of the Finance Commission team. And what is the duties of the Finance Commission? It needs to make recommendations to the Honorable President on the following issues. So the Finance Commission is a separate. It's like how you have the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Committee, which prepares a national economic survey. Likewise, we have the Finance Commission, which advises the Honorable President of India, and it comes up with its own set of recommendations. Now, what are those recommendations? On what all areas? Allocation and distribution of net proceeds of taxes between central and state government, and the allocation between states of the respective shares of such proceeds. And second, principles governing grants in aid to the state government. Now, what are grants in aid? Typically, for very special projects, funds need to be transferred from the central government to the state government. Measures which are needed to augment the consolidated fund of India of a state, supplement the resources and municipalities in the state on the basis of State Finance Commission's recommendations, and any other matter as referred to the Finance Commission by the Honorable President of India in the interest of sound finances. So effectively it talks about money management within the country, how much the country gets and how that money needs to be spent. If you understand, friends, budget is a statement of what has happened and the projection. Finance Commission is likely to give a framework within which the budget numbers have to operate. I think, to put it simple, I think that would make easier sense to understand. So these are the Finance Commission starting from 1951. Every 5 years we've had, and now we are in the 15th Finance Commission, which talks for the period between 2020 to 25, and this is now extended to 25-26 as well, thanks to what's happened now. We are focusing only on the 15th Finance Commission, friends. It was constituted on 27th November 2017 and supposed to be for a period of 5 years from 2020 to 2025. Shri N.K. Singh, who is a former IAS officer and former secretary to the Government of India, was appointed as the chairman of the Finance Commission. And they had submitted two reports. This is the first report what we are going through today. One is the annual report for the FY 2020-21 and a final report for FY 21-22 to 2025-26. And the first annual report had to be submitted before 30th November, and they did that on 30th of October. And what are the components of the Finance Commission? The annual report, it shall have reference to the duties laid down by the Constitution under Article 280, recommended map for fiscal consolidation. Now, you would have heard this, especially immediately after the budget. You will see, like, in every newspaper or every journalist using the term fiscal consolidation. What does it effectively mean? Typically, we borrow to repay our loans or meet our expenses. Interest is a huge expenditure which India has. So the effective intent is over a period to become debt free, at least on a year-on-year basis, and then to start repaying our debts. So what is the roadmap for that? And proposing performance-based incentives for states in specified areas like widening and deepening of GST tax base, progress made in increasing tax and non-tax revenues, and promoting ease of doing business, achievements in implementation of flagship schemes of the government, and allocation of funds for disaster risk management. If you notice, even recently, friends, the government allowed the states to increase their ability to borrow from 3% to 5%. But they said that incremental 2% is possible, where half a percent of the 2% they could borrow without any criterion, but the remaining 1.5% only if they follow some central government schemes like Jandan and whatever. Now, this is the central government's way of saying, yes, you are given this leeway, but please fall in line. We want you to follow these. So, because ultimately we need to think like a country, like as one unit. You look at a place like China, it's very, very strong. They have a single unitary command. But you look at a place like US, states have far more command than the center, and each state literally can have its own very, very diverse way of work. That's why you have even an income tax. In US, you have a federal tax and a state tax. Now, as far as India is concerned, since we've given a lot more onus to this, I mean, I wouldn't use the word onus, authority to the central government to collect taxes, especially after GST. So they are saying that the center is saying this whatever we allocate as a state government's pool would be distributed among states entirely on the basis of their performance based on certain criterion. What that is, we will be seeing in some time from now. Look at it like how a father is going to distribute funds with his children. The child which performs better will be rewarded better. I think that's how the center is also trying to deal with the states. Moving on, reasons for a single year report. Creation of two new union territories, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, after abrogation of Article 370, which necessitated Finance Commission to examine how best needs can be addressed. Because this report, the first report, is only for FY 2021. You notice, otherwise, every FC report is for a period of 5 years. Now, because of the fact that two new union territories have been created, and union territories allocation is by the expenditure is borne by the center. They come under be it Puducherry or Delhi or any other union territory. It comes under the ambit of center. Similarly, IMF's observation on India's synchronized slowdown, which will result in slower growth in the economy. Government's measures in addressing the slowdown in the country through various structural reforms, the results of which the government expects over the next few quarters. So, for these three reasons, the government felt it was appropriate to have an FC report. And in view of above, the FC had submitted its report for FY 2020-21, but all this was prior to COVID. So there is going to be a good amount of divergence from what we originally envisaged and what it is likely to be after COVID. But I don't want to worry about the impact of COVID and stuff. In a normal scenario, what was and that how the country was running is what we're going to look at. What is the fiscal roadmap? Now, tax revenue has remained broadly unchanged in India since 1990s. Hence, the Commission recommends that to increase the tax ratio from both macroeconomic and redistributive perspective. Broadening of tax base. This is something which India has always been concerned about. Our tax base is about 3.5 to 4%, abysmally low compared to developed economies, which are in high 20s or high 30s. To increase the capacity and expertise of tax administration at all tiers of the government. The Commission also recommends that the government should comply with the letter and spirit of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, since it believes that a credible fiscal and debt trajectory roadmap remains problematic due to uncertainty in the economy. We will be seeing the FRBM Act in some time from now, and also try and understand why that is so important. The FC also recommends that the central government and state government should comply with the recommended path of debt consolidation. And doing so, they must abide by the definition of both debt and fiscal deficit as contained in the FRBM Act. Moving on, now let's try and understand the finances of both state government and union. It's very, very fascinating, friends. I mean, the perspective you get from this is really intriguing, because ultimately this is the finances of our nation. What we see in budget is a different perspective, the finance ministry's perspective. The finance commission has no need to market itself to anyone, so there's zero requirement for window dressing, and which is why for the first time we are also going through the finance commission report. So I'm sure for most of us, This will be the first time we are reading the finance commission report. So which is nothing but a brutal statement of reality. So let's look at it, friends. The Union budget of 2019-20 implied a GDP growth of 11%. When I say 11%, it is nominal growth and not real GDP. So we need to reduce the factor for inflation. So if the inflation is 4 or 5%, the growth what we are talking about is 6 to 7% realistically. So where the GDP was supposed to reach about 211 lakh crores, and which is a growth of about 21 lakh crores from 190 lakh crores earlier. Considering the economic activity in the first quarter of 1920, the GDP growth is reassessed from 11 to 10%. And we expected pickup in economic activity and a mild increase in the inflation rate. The nominal GDP is projected to grow at 11% for 2020-21. But now all estimates say that India is likely to shrink by about 5%. So if that were to hold good, this 210 is likely to become 200 instead of 232. I mean, that's a massive, massive dip. But what to do? That's going to be the reality thanks to COVID. And let's look at when you look at the gross tax revenue, friends. The budget estimates of gross tax revenue is for 1920 is 24.6 lakh crores. So which on a GDP of say 200 is about 20%. But this is for 1920, and when we see the earlier slide, for 1920 the GDP is re-estimated at 2,10,000 crores. On 2,10,000 crores, our tax estimates is 24.6, but these have been reassessed to 22.5, which effectively means our tax collection is about 10%. Tax to GDP ratio is 10.5%, which is one of the lowest as far as large economies are concerned. Most of the developed economies have tax to GDP of at least 20% and beyond, 24, 25, 28%. So imagine the size of developed economy. Let's take US for the example. It's upwards of 25%. So the economy is India is a $3 trillion economy, approx 2.6, 2.7. US is a $20 trillion economy, 10 almost 8 times, and its tax collection is tax to GDP's ratio is 2.5 times. So the amount of resources a country has is at least 20 times what India has, and the population of US is 1/4 India's population. So literally, the government has 80 times more money to spend on its citizens compared to what India can do. I think so. That's the real gap between where India is to where US is. And what is also interesting to note, friends, is the budget estimates. So effectively, the total downward tax, the revised estimate is about 22.55 lakh crores. So if you notice in the earlier year, uh, I'm sorry, the tax buoyancy ratio, as they call it, that is, if GDP grows by 1, what would be the growth in tax rates? Ideally, any tax buoyancy in excess of 1 is positive. I mean, it's definitely good because you grow by 1 year and you collect more than 1.1 or 1.2, it's great. But in India, tax buoyancy was expected for 1920 to be around 0.84. But the government expects, the FC expects it to improve to 1.14 in view of stability in tax policy. And with an expected tax buoyancy of 1.14 and a GDP of 11% growth in nominal GDP, the gross tax revenue is likely to grow by 12.5%, and the gross tax revenue projected was 25.38 lakhs for 2020-21. Definitely, we are nowhere close to that number. All tax collections are down anywhere between 30 to 70% as of now for the first quarter. Moving on, non-tax revenue and non-debt capital receipts. So if you see the revenue side, the receipt side of any government's receipts and payments account, you will see tax revenues dominating with almost 60%. Then you will have these non-tax revenues, borrowings, and other things. So what are these? We'll come to the components later, but what is the estimation? For 1920, it was originally budgeted at 3.13 lakh, but subsequently it went up to 3.55 lakhs thanks to the controversial dividend which was paid out from RBI, and the FC conservatively projected a non-tax revenue to grow at the rate of at the rate of GDP, which will result in about 3.94 lakh crores. We do not know whether divestment will happen at the same levels, or whether divestment, of course, is not part of non-tax, it's part of non-debt capital receipts. Whether RBI income will grow at the same level for it to distribute 1.9 lakh crores of dividend, that only time has to say. Again, non-debt capital receipts, it's what sorry, this comes predominantly from recovery of loans and advances and divestment of public sector undertakings. So the budget estimate for recovery of loans, what the government of India has given, is about close to 15,000 crores, and it is maintained at the same level. Whereas divestment proceeds are estimated at 1.05 lakh crores. If you notice, I think if I'm not wrong, in the current budget, I think it was about 2 lakh 10,000 or 1 lakh, 2 lakh 10,000 was the budget estimate by the Revenue Secretary, by the Department of Disinvestment. We still do not know to what extent these numbers will hold good going forward, friends. Uh, Revenue expenditure. So we have seen the receipt side. Receipt side was tax revenue, and then we saw non-tax revenues and non-debt capital receipts. Now we are moving to the expenditure side. So the largest payout for India is the interest on loans. So it is estimated that fresh loans will be borrowed at 6% rate of interest for a country like India. And applying the standard calculation, the average interest cost and the projected fiscal deficit is likely to be 3.5%. And interest liability for 2020-21 will be 7.1 lakh crore. Now, what is very, very concerning is this year, as per the original estimates of both the Finance Commission as well as the Finance Ministry in the budget, India would be borrowing to pay its interest. So let us say if our interest liability is 7 lakh and 10,000 crores, we will be borrowing a sum equal to 7 lakh 10, if not more. So you take this number for 2020-21, our GDP was originally estimated at 2 lakh 30,000 crores. And on 2 lakh 30,000 crores, 3.5% is roughly close to, if I'm not wrong, roughly about 750, 7.5, 7.6 lakh crores. And our interest outflow is 7.1 lakh crore. Now, what has happened? Our GDP numbers are going to come down. The interest outflow is going to remain the same, if not go up, because this year we'll have a higher fiscal deficit, which has to be offset by borrowings. And because the debt to GDP ratio is going to go up, cost of borrowing will also likely be more. So, in which case, we would effectively end up borrowing much more than our interest outflow, which means that India is borrowing principal to repay interest. Very, very grim scenario. Then pensions and salaries, a large chunk. The Finance Commission estimates that pay and allowances of central government will grow at 8% in 2020-21. And it's estimated that the annual growth in pension will be 9% in 2020-21. Defense expenditure. The salary component of defense expenditure is likely to be 8%, grow by 8%. And the non-salaried component should be allowed to grow. So the non-salaried, if you look at the defense expenditure, I believe, if I'm not wrong, we have about 4 lakh crores of defense expense, of which 2 lakh crore is towards salary, 1 lakh crore is towards pension, and another 1 lakh crore is towards capex. Now, this 1 lakh crore is effectively the expenditure which is being spent on ammunition and jackets and stuff like that. But the remaining 75% of the expenditure is towards manpower costs. So, and this pension cost is only going to keep on increasing, as we see it's growing at 8%. And hence, the non-salaried component of defense revenue expenditure is projected to grow at 15%. So that 1 lakh crore is likely to go up by 15%. Major subsidies: food, fertilizer, and petroleum subsidies. The finance, these are the largest subsidies which the government is incurring. The FC is of the view that accumulated off-budget liabilities relating to insufficient provision of subsidies should be clearly identified and not increased further. That's why if you followed in some time. There is always this term called India has this twin balance sheet problem, meaning what is in the balance sheet of India and what is in the balance sheet of public sector undertakings which has a sovereign guarantee, like Food Corporation of India or any of these public sector undertakings where funds have been taken for uh, subsidizing public provision. Such subsidies also should be brought within the ambit of the Government of India's budget. I think that's what is the recommendation. Food subsidies is kept at 1.85 lakh crores for 2020-21. There's no change in that. And considering the trends in disbursement of petroleum subsidy and fertilizer subsidy, it is like a 4% increase in subsidy is considered. Other revenue expenditure, the non-salary, non-subsidy expenditure in different sectors of various institutions. Uh, what is very, very appalling is our allocation. I mean, scientific research and development is not even a significant line item for us. The FC assessed a growth provision equaling the projected GDP growth, providing for important sectors like science and technology, atomic research, external affairs. Hence, the budget estimate is at 31 crores as compared 31.9 as compared to 29 crores. This is where we are significantly giving up our advantage for future. Transfers to states, union and territories and local governments. So this is how the central government is going to distribute. So the budget estimate for 1920 was about 6 lakh crores, 5.96 lakh crores. And for 2020-21, it is likely to be 7.2, a significant jump. But it's likely to be much more because central government is likely to compensate for various COVID-related issues. So the real number, when we see the FC recommendation later, we will understand during the year. Capital expenditure and fiscal deficit. So financing expenses, which should be legitimately covered within the budget through off-budget borrowings and through para-statal entities, such as the government entities, which I was mentioning to, should happen within the FRBM Act. We look at FRBM as an act which gave the framework for how spending has to be done responsibly. And the focus where the government felt that India should have a strong capex for investment in future. So keeping in view the need to sustain capex at reasonable levels and taking a disaggregated view of the different components of expenses and also assuming no further increase in off-budget financing, the government felt that, or the Finance Commission felt that the fiscal deficit of 2021 should be around 3.5%. Already we are talking about 5 or 6%. So this number as we speak today may not be too feasible. And similarly, Fitch, which is an rating agency, during the month of April 2020 said the fiscal deficit could be as high as 6.22%. Now, the Finance Commission's terms of reference question whether a separate mechanism for funding defense and internal security can be set up. And if so, how much a mechanism should be operationalized? They were talking more like having a separate cess for defense, like how we had for education and higher educational cess. So they wanted to constitute an expert committee with experts from Ministry of Defense, Home Affairs, and Finance as part of it. Defense expenditure as a percentage of GDP. This is very interesting for us to understand, friends. The red line is India. So India is roughly around 2% at this point, or 2.5%. Okay, we are at about close to between 2 and 2.5%. And China is about 3%. China is around 2%. Russia is very, very high. It's almost 4.1%. And United States is about 3.5%. UK is around 2.5%. India is around 2%, slightly less than 2%. So that would give you a perspective on how much we are actually spending. So because we're talking of 4 lakh crore and 2 lakh 20,000 crores, so it's slightly less than 2%. So this is the union projection of union government finances. So I would want you to understand the receipts of the government. So let's look at the 2019-20 reassessed. So that will be a realistic number. The total revenue receipts is estimated to be at 26 lakh crores, of which gross tax revenue, which is both direct taxes and indirect taxes together, is is roughly about 22 lakh crores. And again, direct taxes, corporate tax is 6.3 lakh crore, income tax is 5.6, so works out about 12 lakh crores. And customs, excise, and GST together uh, is the remaining. So the remaining is about 10 lakh crores. And non-tax revenues of 3.55 lakh crores, where the largest chunk comes from dividends from RBI, is 1.5 lakh crores. Other dividends is 57,000. Other non-tax revenues, telecommunication. So effectively, we have a non-tax revenue of 3.55 lakh crores. And from this, you transfer the state's share of taxes, which is 7.78 lakh crores. And the net revenue to center is about 18.3 lakh crores. And if you look at the revenue expenditure, is about 24 lakh crores. And how the difference, if you see the difference between if you see the fiscal deficit is about 7 lakh 83,000 crores at the bottom. So 18.3 lakh crores is what the center has. It has to spend 24 lakh crores, and it has to make provisions for other transfers. So net, it has a shortfall of 7.83 lakh crores. And if you see the capital expenditure, friends, in all of this is only 3.3 lakh crores. So the government's expenditure on building future capacity is only 15%. Defense revenue expenditure is 2 lakh crores. Pension is 1.74 lakh crore, of which a large chunk is defense pension. Interest payment is 6.6 lakh crore, which is likely to go to 7 lakh crores. And science and technology, this is where we need to look at. Our expenditure is 27,000, 28,000 crores, peanuts for a country of this size. Food subsidy and other subsidies about 3.3 lakh crore. So recommended by Finance Commission, revenue deficit grants of 34,000 crores, disaster relief to states of 10,000 crores, and grants to local bodies to states is about 76,000 crores. We shall look at them in some detail as we move on. And we are looking at a GDP of 2,09,000 crores, and an overall debt, if you notice, for the government is likely to be about 97 lakh crores, 98 lakh crores approximately, which is likely to go to 106. So your public debt to GDP ratio is between 45%, about 45%, 46%. But if you add the off-balance sheet debt, which is the government's debt, which is there, and also the state government debt, the overall public debt to GDP ratio is about 80% of our GDP. So finances of the state governments, that's even more interesting. So just as how we saw what GDP is for the center, the gross state domestic product forms a basis for analyzing fiscal parameters of the state. The base year for the projection of GSDP is 2017-18. Northeast and Himalayan states have been differentiated primarily because they have very minimal means to commercially exploit, and they are literally the virgin greens of India. So that's something where the government is very keen to preserve their culture and heritage. Aggregate GSDP has been anchored around the country's GDP during 1819 to 2021, so as to reduce the vast variability between states as has been observed. So this is the projected rate of growth. All states, 29 1920, and the orange ones are for 2020-21. If you notice, there is a marginal dip for northeastern state, but still they're not too far behind. What is very interesting to understand is these numbers today will not hold good. All these will be negative. So we're talking about minus growth. So obviously this is only a recommendation report as things stood last year. What it is likely to happen this year, I think let's wait for time to give us an answer on that. Own tax and non-tax revenue of states. So you have the state GST revenues. So until June 2020, state GST revenues are protected, 22, by a scheme of guaranteed compensation by central government. with 14% growth of tax revenues. The protection of GST revenues at 14% set against the growth in aggregate GSDP of 11% in 2021 yields a buoyancy of 1.27, whereas the central government buoyancy, tax buoyancy about 0.84. But yes, they're talking about a tax buoyancy of 1.27 for the states. Considering that the recent slowdown in economic activities affecting collections from non-GST states, the tax buoyancy of states is assessed at a uniform of 1.16 with respect to GSDP during 1890 to 2021. Non-tax revenue. Own non-tax revenues of states include interest receipts, dividends, profits, royalties, irrigation receipts, receipts from forestry, wildlife, receipts from elections. And these revenues grew at a trend rate of 9.9% during 2011-12 to 17-18. So that's fairly good. And for 2021, the FC has taken that the revenue should keep pace with the state's growth in GSDP, which we saw on average is about 11% for the next year, at least as far as projection is concerned. And revenue expenditure growth is likely to be at 9.4%. So they are expecting a marginal surplus where the revenue growth will be at 11% and expenditure growth will be at 9.4%. So this is where the projected revenues of the states, various states are likely to be. These states are in the order of alphabetic. They are in the alphabetical order. So Andhra, Arunachal. So I'm focused on states with a deficit. Gujarat with a GSDP of 16 lakh crore is likely to have a deficit. Same thing with Maharashtra, marginal deficit. These are states which also help in horizontal distribution. Own revenue tax receipts, own tax revenue, own non-tax revenue, total revenue expenditure, interest payments, and pre-devolution revenue. So technically, this is where each of these states are, and Telangana is again a state with pre-devolution deficit revenue. So these numbers are here for you to see. And when it comes to ranking, obviously you can look at Maharashtra being number one in terms of gross state domestic product, and as a distant number one. And next comes Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh, both at 19.8, so roughly about 20. And then you have Karnataka at 18.8, Gujarat at 16.3. So, and the rest is the remaining spots are fulfilled by the remaining states at this point. So, interesting. So, vertical and horizontal devolution. So, vertical devolution is how the central government gives money to the shares its resources to the state, and horizontal is how the states devolve based on certain parameters. So, the central government's pool for the state is what we call as vertical devolution, and how this pool gets split between states is a horizontal devolution. So the distribution of net proceeds of taxes, when you say net proceeds, net of administrative costs between union and states, is called as vertical devolution. And the net proceeds means all taxes reduced by cost of collection and cess and surcharge, because cess and surcharge are for a very specific purpose, and that doesn't form part of the state government's pool for distribution. Until that, so anything which the government, central government collects as cess or surcharge, the central government only gets. It doesn't go to the state government. So that's something we need to understand, friends. Until the 10th Finance Commission, separate percentages had been recommended for devolution of income tax and union excise duties. However, post the 80th amendment, net proceeds of taxes collected by the unions are shareable with states. So total taxes collected, you reduce cess, you reduce surcharge, and then you reduce the cost of collection. The balance becomes a net pool available for distribution. And this pool gets, there is a ratio, like for example, the 15th Finance Commission has said the ratio has to be, 14th Finance Commission has said the ratio has to be 42%. So let's say total pool is 20 lakh crores, 42%, 8.4 lakh crore will be given to the states. Now, how is 8.4 lakh crore has to go to states? There is a mechanism which comes under the Finance Commission. We'll see that. Now what has happened? The 15th Finance Commission has reduced it from 42 to 41%. Why? Because the states of Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir are now brought within the ambit of the central government, because they are now made union territories. So therefore, central government needs more resources to manage those two jurisdictions. So the divisible pool is calculated like this. So gross tax revenues minus cost of collection minus cess and surcharge including the GST compensation minus tax revenue of union territories minus transfer from National Calamity Contingency Duty NCDCD to the National Disaster Response Fund. The balance will be your divisible pool. So typically on the 20.86 lakh crore, 82% of the will become the net tax revenue or the divisible pool. From this, that 4.2%, 42% or 41% is being calculated. So horizontal, how this pool gets distributed between states, that is where we are going to see in the horizontal piece. So the criterion has varied from one finance commission to another. If you notice at one point population was relevant, 10% weightage become 25, maintained at 25, then came down to 17.5. Then later it became a case where population for 2 years, two base years was considered relevant. Then land area, forest cover, income distance from the average of the country, fiscal capacity distance, tax effort, fiscal discipline. So these were the bases on which the numbers get split and states get ranked on each of these. So the FC recommends three principles of need, equity, and efficiency for distribution. So you cannot be funding inefficiency. I think that's a message which is very, very clear. So population has been assigned a weight of 15% because obviously, and population of 2011 was taken as the terms of reference for this. And therefore, larger the, and again, area was also considered one of the important areas consideration. So larger the uh, area, larger should be as outside because there are other than criteria to be measured. So 15% weightage was given for land area. Forest and ecology, again, that's another very important criterion for the government. So another 10% was uh, assigned for this forest and ecology. Income distance. So this is important. This focuses on equity principle, where the criterion is to make division formula more equalizing and progressive. So it provides higher devolution to states with lower per capita income and lower devolution for states with higher per capita income. So income distance criterion was kept at 45%. Similarly, demographic performance. So this is very important. It's a measure of total fertility rate, TFR. So states which have achieved a lower TFR will be scored on demographic performance, whereas states with higher TFR will be scored with lower performance. And there is a weighting of 12.5%. Now, what is this TFR? Is total fertility ratio. So if it is, so it's a rate at which the population multiplies. So a TFR of 2.1 and above means the population level is maintained. Anything less than 2.1 means that the population level starts going down. Tax effort. This criterion will reward the states with a higher tax collection efficiency and will also encourage states to be more tax efficient. So a total weight of 2.5% is provided for tax effort. So effective and this definition for TFR, it's the average number of children that would be born to a woman over a lifetime. She was to experience the exact current age specific fertility rates and survives her childbearing years fully. So typically for a family, more than 2.1 would be a maintenance rate. So interstate shares of states. So for 2020-21, you see what all states get what percentage of the pool. Very, very interesting. Andhra Pradesh gets 4%, Arunachal gets 1.7. Let's look at the larger devolution first. Let's go to double digit. You have Uttar Pradesh getting 17.9%. You have Bihar getting 10.06%. Then you have Madhya Pradesh getting 7.8, Maharashtra getting only 6%. That's a problem why they have they feel that they contribute much more to the government and they get far lesser, because income tax by far they collect the largest in the country. Odisha gets 4.6%, Rajasthan gets close to 6%, Tamil Nadu gets 4%. So you can see West Bengal gets 7.5%, a sizable chunk. So Andhra Pradesh and Telangana about 6% altogether. Grants in aid. So moving to the last leg of the report, the FC is recommended inter in the following grants: revenue deficit grants, grants to local bodies, disaster management grants, sector specific grants, performance grants, and state specific grants. What are these deficit grants? Based on the projected tax revenue of central government and the shares derived from the horizontal devolution formula, the share of each state is derived in absolute numbers. And this has been used to derive the post devolution revenue deficit or surplus of the states. And 14 out of the 28 states faced a combined post tax deficit of 74,340 crores. So we saw this earlier, friends. We looked at the revenue deficits here, the pre-devolution revenue deficit. So where some states have had a deficit, this is for 2020-21. So the government over a period, this is their estimation for 2020-21. So the revenue deficit grant was for that, for maintaining that number. So the states, apart from the percentages, if they were to have a deficit, the central government would compensate them for that deficit. So state-wise revenue deficit grant for 2021 now, these are the numbers what is estimated, and you would see that it's a 100% fill-in. It's the extent of the deficit the states are likely to be filled in with the revenue deficit grant. And I think the state with the largest revenue deficit is Himachal Pradesh. Kerala is 15,000 crores. Himachal Pradesh is 11,400 crores. Assam is 7,500. So, and all these are likely to be fully funded by the central government's revenue deficit grant. Special grants, these are given to ensure that no state gets less than the total amount of devolution. And revenue deficit grants estimated to be amount of devolution and revenue deficit grants estimated to be 920. So if we look at Karnataka, Mizoram, and Telangana are being funded with special grants, since the devolution plus revenue deficits for 2020-21 is less than 1920. So therefore, the FC has provided grants to these states aggregating to 6,700 crores. Sectoral grants for various specific sectors like health, pre-primary education, nutrition, police training and housing, railways, judiciary, statistics, maintenance grants for roads. So again, 7,700 crores have been given for nutrition alone. So for each of these sectors, specific grants have been provided. Performance-based initiatives, implementation of agricultural reforms, incentives for education, districts and aspirational blocks, power sector reforms, promotion of domestic and international tourism, enhancing trade including exports. So the state should take preparatory action by establishing a credible implementation and monitoring system, and the grants will be provided on that basis. So there is an allocation. So which is where the government is trying to promote competition between states. Now comes to the final leg of what we call as last mile delivery, empowering local bodies. Grants in aid to local bodies, the total size of the grants for local bodies is about 90,000 crores, substantial, and which is 4.3% of the total divisible pool. And the interstate distribution of grants for local bodies among states will be based on population and the area, the ratio. So 90% is based on population and 10% on the base of area. The proportion of grants between rural and urban again is in the ratio of close to 2/3 and 1/3. And all the tiers in the panchayats, village, block, and district shall receive these grants. And the interstate distribution among the panchayats shall be in conformity with the following bands. 70 to 85% for village panchayats, 10 to 25% for block panchayats, and 5 to 15 for district panchayats. Please understand, friends, this is apart from what the State Finance Commission devolves to each of these. This is what the Central Finance Commission is going to do. And the state shall transfer grants in aid to local bodies within 10 working days from the date of receipts. And failure will attract interest at the rate of on the prevailing market rate on state developmental loans for the previous year. And local bodies are institutions of local self-governance which look after the administration. Like you have this municipal or town panchayat elections which happen. So that's independent of the parliament, but they work together to ensure that at the last mile level the society is taken care. So aggregate grants to local bodies. So this is a statistic in terms of what is the population, what is the area, share of population, share of area, and how the grant of, I believe, 90,000 crores is split. That's how this works out to. And again between rural and urban. Disaster risk management. So the state government can incur most of the disaster related expenses through state disaster response funds, and these could be augmented and replenished through national disaster response fund when disasters of rare severity necessitate, like any floods or tsunami or whatever happens. And the Disaster Management Act stipulates that the constitution of mitigation funds in addition to disaster response funds at the state and the central level. The Finance Commission recommends for period 2021 the fund shall be mitigation fund shall be set up at both national and state level, and these shall be used for local level and community based intervention, and which will reduce the risk and promote environment friendly settlements and livelihood practices. And creation of disaster management mitigation fund is over and above the disaster risk management and state disaster risk management fund. So the mitigation fund is more like a rehabilitation fund from what I understand, and also it's more preventive in nature to ensure like for example setting up mangroves in flood prone areas could be a mitigation fund. So allocation to national risk management fund. So it is getting split in the ratio of mitigation 20% and 80% for response. So preventive measures are now being given some weightage. So the ratio of cost sharing arrangement between the central and the state to the fund is 75 to 25 for general states and 90-10. So 75 and 90 are what the central government will spend. Total amounts allocated to SDRM, State Disaster Risk Management Fund, Relief Management Fund, is 28,000 crores, and for national it is 12,390. And the funds in these two shall be shared in the manner as provided. So mitigation is 20%, response is 80%. And state-wise allocation of these relief funds. And again, on account of COVID, the central government has released 11,000 crores under the State Disaster Relief Management Fund to all the states, and that will happen in this ratio only. So the committee recommends some amount shall be earmarked within NDRF and NDMF for certain priorities related to preparedness, mitigation, and recovery, and it earmarks 1,200 crores in NDRF and 1,000 similar amount for NDMF. And what are those priorities? One is modernization of fire services, resettlement of displaced people, and catalytic assistance in drought-prone areas, managing seismic and landslide risks, reducing the risk of urban flooding, which is a problem in almost all cities, including Mumbai and Chennai, mitigation measures to prevent erosion. Now, 12 most drought-prone cities, states, we have AP, Bihar, Gujarat, Jharkhand, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and UP, and 10 hill states. And 7 most populous cities, all the metros are here in this. So what's the way forward as far as the commission reports is concerned? It's recommended major items in its reports as specified in its terms of reference. Some of the other items pertaining to specific grants, separate mechanism of funding defense and internal security will be addressed in the final report. And now, when we look at it, the final report will have a lot of COVID flavor all through. Strengthening this federal partnership is an important driving force for enabling the country to realize its true potential. And the FC recommends a constitution of an expert group to draft a legislation which will establish a statutory framework to implement the essential features of sound public finance management system, similar in lines of international best practices. So it's a fairly detailed report, friends, and what is very interesting to note is how the partnership between the center and the state is so deeply evolving. As much as all these political parties have their differences, when it comes to ground level operation and execution, they just don't have a choice but to work together. And that's where the bureaucracy comes into picture, the administrative mechanism comes into picture. Because time and again we are so used to criticizing the government, but the magnitude of work which happens in a country as large and diverse as India is phenomenal. And honestly, going through the Finance Commission report for the first time was extremely revolving. So these were some of our thoughts, and we wish and hope you also had a fruitful time listening to this. Thank you, and see you soon.